Hello, everybody, and welcome to Fresh Off the Set. My name is David Osmond, and I am so happy today. I got a very special guest. He's an author, a best-selling New York Times #1 selling author, Brandon Mull. If you don't know Brandon Mull, while you're listening to this, go ahead and do a quick little Google. I don't know what rock you've been living under, but he has an amazing children's book series that he started over 20 years ago. He's the mastermind behind the beloved Fablehaven series. He's also got Dragonwatch and many other incredible fantasy adventures that have sparked the imagination of readers young and old, kids of all ages. I'm honored to have him here to talk about his life, his beginnings, and where he's going next, including a series that is kind of a new release that he had recently that also, of course, hit the top of the New York Times bestselling lists, and such a talent and a great friend. So without further ado, Brandon Mull, welcome to Fresh Off the Set. Thank you for being with me.
Yeah, thank you. I'm really happy to be here.
You've been an author your entire life. You've always dreamed, as we've talked about, diving into this world that you've done your whole life. What was it like as a kid? Did you imagine yourself sitting in this chair today, this far in your career, having all the success you've had? Like, what does that feel like? And could you have foreshadowed this? Is this what you've dreamt of?
Here's the thing. What I knew as a kid was that I liked to daydream. Yeah. That was what I really knew. I lived in my head. I was the oldest kid in my family. And you could leave me alone in a room and I would be fine because I would just live in my brain. I would make up stories. I'd walk around that room pantomiming, fist fights and action and adventure. And I hated if someone was watching me because I knew I looked so weird, But
can you hear the voices in my head too?
Yeah. I definitely had an active thing going on in my mind, and I didn't know how to harness that for a while.
Did your parents, your guardians, did they see this in you, and did they cultivate that, or did they be like, wow, this kid is special?
Special, maybe. Yeah, they weren't sure what to do with me, right? I had a 4th grade teacher who said he'll either be famous or because I was a big, different personality. I was just a different kind of kid, right?
Yeah.
And so there reached a point where the stories in my head started to seem like something interesting about me. I started to realize not everybody made up stories all the time. Huh. And it became like, I wonder if I could share this with people. Because the older I got and the better the stories in my head got, the more I felt like I had this secret inner world that I had no way of sharing. And so writing became a way to try to do that. And I didn't really get serious about it till high school. So it all started out just loving to daydream, and then learning to love books. Narnia was my gateway. And then after that, that opened the gates. At first, I didn't realize how fun reading a book could be when I was a little guy.
So as a teenager is really where it clicked. Was that when you picked up the books and you had the Narnia series? And is that when it started, or was it younger than that?
Kind of like I found Narnia kind of like a tween, right?
Okay.
11 or 12, something like that.
Sure.
And until then, I hadn't learned to like I'd read a picture book with my folks. That was fine.
Dr. Seuss.
Yeah. That's easy and good. But if you gave me a thick book, I'd rather go ride my bike or something.
Sure.
But then when I read Narnia, it kind of was like, oh, there are other people like me. There are other people who imagine these crazy, and I was finally confronted with an imagination that might be better than.
You said something that I thought it's so simple, but it's brilliant. As we consume entertainment, we turn on the TV and it's outside in. We're just consuming and pulling it into our bodies. When you read, it's the opposite, right? It's the inside out. Tell me about that process, and how have you seen kids benefit from that reading and explore their own personality?
So part of what I try to do as a writer, everyone wants to have, at least I like to think that everyone wants to have some component of their life or their job that does some good, right? And for me, if I'm doing some good in the world, it's trying to promote literacy. It's kind of being a cheerleader for why we read.
Yeah.
And I think at the core of that is most of the entertainment we watch. If you're trying to think of what kind of entertainment will best develop, right? That outside in stuff, it doesn't work you the same way as when someone shows you an image and you just consume it. That is different than someone gives you words and you produce right? You build this internal landscape. As you read, it's got to be a good book. They have to have good prompts and good details. But if you read a good book, you build this internal landscape and you truly are a co-creator of the story. Someone has given you the code and you bring that code to your mind. And if you do that on repeat, you start building this really rich inner landscape, a rich inner life, which is sort of hard to develop in ways. With TV, with movies, I like that kind of entertainment.
It's entertaining.
When it's well done, it's great.
Fun.
But you're more of a consumer there. It's something outside of you. I like to talk to kids about how when you read a book, it's almost like you're part of the story because it's going on inside of you and you're creating it and you're influencing it and you're picturing it the way you want to see it. And that's why sometimes after reading a good book, you go to the movie theater and it's kind of a disappointment because you had something better going on in your own head. But if you don't ever learn that, you're missing out on what I think is the kind of the richest, most intimate.
That's cool. I bet you've seen incredible firsthand experiences of seeing reluctant leaders all of a sudden pick up a book, and your series in general, like to watch them come to life. And have you seen personalities change in children as they become literate?
Yeah, here's the thing. Like, I don't get to see the germination of that usually. The closest I've come to seeing that truly germinate before my eyes is with my own kids.
Sure.
Because I'm there for those moments, right? But like what I do get is I get teens and 20-somethings who'll come up to me at a signing, and now they're old enough to articulate what happened, right? And they'll be like, your book was the book that made me learn to like reading.
Wow.
And I swear part of that is because I came to their school, I did an assembly about reading, they connected that to my book, tried the book, it was fun enough that it worked, and as a consequence, I mean, I promise you, I get hundreds and thousands of people who come up to me over the years and say, hey, yours was the book, yours got me going, made me love fantasy, made me love reading, made me want to write, and that is... There's not a single time I hear that it doesn't mean to me. You know what I mean? Where I'm like, oh man, that mattered to that person. That changed something to them. Because I know what Narnia did for me. It changed the trajectory of my life.
That's when it makes it all worth it. Because what's not seen is, you have this creative mind that's constantly rolling and creating and just building things inside. But to get that out pen to paper, that is an art form, and that's practice. That's a lot of time. Yeah,
that part is so hard. And like to any young writer out there, and really young or old writer out there, I mean, if that sometimes feels like a choke point, welcome to the club.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you can see this awesome stuff in your head, and then you try to write it down, and it just doesn't translate. And you're like, wait, am I a simpleton? Because you look at what you wrote, and it doesn't measure up to your favorite books, At least that was my experience for you. And for a while there, I thought, oh, maybe that means my imagination's no good. But with some time and experience, I learned, no. I just had to learn how to express what I was seeing in my head with words. And that took time and practice. I had to in my writing skills. And the basics of that were just, hey, pay attention to how your favorite authors build their scene. Practice writing your own scenes. Over time, you'll get better at it. A movie like, you go watch Avengers.
Sure.
And it's hard from watching Avengers to see how that movie was made just by watching the movie. You can see what they captured, but it's hard to see like all the guys doing CGI on computers and lights and costumes and like there was a lot of things going on
to
get that image.
Huge.
Yeah, some of the process is invisible when you look at a movie, but when you're reading a book, it's just how somebody organized work. Huh. And so if you if you read a scene you really love, you're like, man, that was a good scene. While you were reading that scene and loving it, you were not paying attention to how it was built. You were enjoying it, and that's as it should be. But after reading a scene you really enjoy, if you want to become a writer, you go back and look a second time. How'd that son of a gun do that? How did that guy just get me into a trance where I was experiencing something as I just read words, right? And you look at what kind of details did they use? How much dialogue did they use? You just look at what they did, right?
Yeah.
And then you practice building your own scenes. And over time, you find your own voice. You find your own style. And you get better at sharing that thing you saw in your head.
It's a beautiful art form when you read something and it just like to life, and then you analytically dive deep, like you're saying, and break it apart. How did they choose those words in that order? And the creativity and the analytical side, the logistics, the left and the right brain coming together. It is a beautiful art form for sure. And how much truth is there to this? I've heard other authors tell me that the deadline, the 11th hour deadline, the graph, the spike, as you put it on a chart of creativity. If I have a deadline at this date, my 11th hour spike just goes crazy, just goes off the charts. Is that true to your tale, or are you just always going, or does that make sense? Like when you have a publishing deal and you're like, I have to finish this by this date, does that spark creative juice?
I absolutely write more books thanks to deadlines.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. You know what I mean? Like necessity is the mother of invention.
Yeah, it is there. The cliche is true.
Yeah, when you're stuck, when you got to get it done, sometimes that's when all the pistons start firing.
You got a writer's block. Have someone hold you accountable.
The funny thing about a novel, though, is you have to click. Because a lot of us have been in that situation where we had a term paper.
Yeah.
And you click into emergency mode and pull an all-nighter and get it done.
Well, that was pretty good.
And it's a beautiful feeling when you're done, and it's a hectic, exciting feeling as you're at 3 a.m.
Adrenaline, endorphins,
trying to make something that makes sense, right? But like with a novel, that has to kick in like 2 months early. You know what I mean?
So there's no fudging that.
You learn the rhythm of, okay, it's already an emergency. You know what I mean? Like 2 months out, and then you try to live 2 months.
You
with
don't
your
sleep
adrenals
for 2
squeezing.
months.
Yeah, a little bit. Like you can be in emergency mode for a long time but it does make you move faster.
Makes a difference. Yeah, that's good. You mentioned there's a phrase you've said that books are like mirrors, but they're also like windows, offering new perspectives. Can you explain that a little bit more in depth?
Yeah. Like I've heard this said, so this isn't my original thought, but I think it's a good point. That point one is sometimes a book can be like, and in this way, sometimes you're reading a book and a character has a thought or a feeling that you can totally relate to. And at its best, they have a thought or a feeling that you have never quite put into words, but they name something that now lets you name it for yourself, right? Like you understand yourself a little better because they name something you've experienced in a way you hadn't yet named. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And in that way, sometimes a book can be like a mirror, or at least that's one example of how it can be. It teaches you a little bit about yourself. Sometimes also, point two would be that a book can be like a window. And sometimes you will read stuff where you're like, okay, I don't feel like this, but it's interesting to see that some people, and it helps me understand other people a little.
Insight.
And also it can be a window into experiences you wish you could have or that you're interested in. Like it would be interesting to know how it felt to be a World War II soldier. Hard to have that experience personally, but vicariously in a book can be a window into what that experience could be.
Yeah.
Or even something fantastical, like what would it be like to be the caretaker at a secret wildlife park for years? Hard to find that anywhere on Earth. But in a book like Fablehaven, you can vicariously see, that's what it might look, right? You know, if an author does their job well, they can bring something to life and let you have a window into an experience that's fantastical or beyond what we can experience in life.
Speaking of fantastical and the Fablehaven series, it has such depth and rich fantasy world aspects to it. You, like you said, you were very creative as a kid, creating these characters, playing, you could just entertain yourself.
Yeah.
That world of writing this genre, that was always the direction you were going to go. Why does that fascinate you so much and draw you in?
Yeah.
What is it about that world?
There's two answers to this. So part of it was just fantasy for some reason was my gateway. Like there's something in my mind that responds to that big imagination. Something inside of me wants to escape some of the mundanity of this world and have a larger than life experience. And fantasy delivered that in a way that was kind of had the special sauce for me.
Yeah.
Like with Narnia, I wanted that to come true desperately, I wanted to live Narnia. I wanted to go through a portal to it, and the closest I could get was reading that book. But then, I'll tell you this: when I was a kid, I went to my grandma's house. My grandma was old, and she had a big closet, and so I was like, maybe, and I
there's a chance.
Yeah, so I'm pushing back through all the coats, and this is true. At the rear of the closet, I found a tiny set of doors.
No way.
Yeah, and I was like, it's showtime.
Let's go, baby.
It's like going through these doors into a small room filled with canned peaches, which was a huge disappointment. Yeah. Grandma's food storage room or something, right?
A delicious disappointment.
So for a brief while, I'm lord of the canned peaches. It's my sad little kingdom. And this truly is kind of my origin story.
This is so funny. This is awesome.
Because I could not go into another world and have those adventures, I started doing it in my head, right? And that was the genesis of writing this kind of stuff. Another way to explain why I do what I do is I was at Comic-Con in San Diego, and I got a chance to hear Peter Jackson talking to Steven Spielberg about movies.
Cool.
In a room with 6,000 of my closest friends.
Yeah. But they were speaking just to you.
Big old Hall H at Comic-Con. But to me, it was very cool to get to hear these guys. They're creatively, they're some of the best we've got, right?
Yeah.
And Peter Jackson, of course, is the guy that directed Lord of the Rings. And someone in the audience asked him, how did you become the guy who directed Lord of the Rings? And hit it out of the park? Did something that a lot of people thought couldn't be done, right? Because no one had
task larger than life.
No one had done a really good fantasy, like a really epic, great fantasy movie yet until he did that, right? And maybe the most epic and famous of all fantasy stories was Lord of the Rings, and the fact that he kind of nailed it, kind of blew everybody away. And his response was, there was the stuff I was into as a teen, and I just stayed into it. And that's pretty close to my thing on why do I write my fantasy books. I don't know. For some reason, that was the stuff that had the special sauce for me growing up. And I just stayed into it.
It's where you're excited.
And as I got older and more mature, I found I could do a better and better job at creating fantasy characters and fantasy worlds and making a dragon feel real, or doing a demon on his deathbed and trying to make that feel authentic. You know what I mean? And just trying to create these moments. And with time and experience, I got better at it, and I didn't want to do anything else.
That process, taking the layers of building such immersive worlds, there's a lot of layers to that onion. And as you build that with word, as you put pen to paper, what is the process, if you can kind of sum it up, especially for those that are listening, maybe they're aspiring authors. They want to do what you do. What's maybe a word of advice to help them get to that next level, to building those immersive worlds? What's the process?
Yeah. I mean, at the center of it is read a lot, write a lot, right? That's the basic engine that helps you move toward doing this. Is you read a lot, you pay attention to how your favorite authors tell their stories, and then you practice writing your own story. Along with that, you learn to be a really good observer, so that you're always grabbing details about people, about environments, right? Like how would I put this into words when you see something unusual, right? You play those kind of mental games. They're nerdy writer games of, you go see Bryce Canyon, and how would I convey this to you know what I mean? Like how would I in words try to describe the cathedrals of stone laid out before me, right? And then the core of it is you're trying to find interesting characters with interesting trouble, right? And so it's, who would I want to spend a lot of time with inside of a story? And how do I put these people into enormous peril? Give them so much trouble. If you love your characters, you give them endless trouble, because that is, and if you truly love them and care about them, then you can let them survive the trouble. Mm-hmm. But the trouble is what makes them interesting, right? So you are daydreaming your brains out until you find really interesting characters, really interesting trouble, and then you try to bring that to life and see if it turns cool.
It's like food, garbage in, garbage out. As reading and an author aspiring, what you consume becomes becomes part of your writing style in some ways, that influence of what you like, what you don't like. For your involvement in this series, Fablehaven has such depth, just magical elements, and it's been such a huge success that changed into the Dragonwatch series you've got, and now it is the Tales of Newell and Doran. These are characters, for those that haven't read it, these are kind of the comic relief characters of Fablehaven that are now taking their own departure from that world into their own. Is that what I understand it to be, this new series?
Yeah, that's right. So you've got Newell and Doran, who are these irresponsible satyrs, and they're so irresponsible and kind of selfish, which is kind of true to the satyr mythology. These guys are the frat boys of the mythological world, the frivolous frat boys kind of, right? And so I thought it would, in Fablehaven, there's a rule that magic is not for mortals, right? When mortals use magic, it's being derived from the magical creatures somehow, right? Making a potion from dragon tears, etc., right? And there's kind of an inverse rule where magical creatures are fundamentally eternal. They don't change, but mortals do. And so when magical creatures interact with mortals, that can introduce change to creatures that don't ordinarily develop and grow and change. And so these satyrs, by interacting with mortals over the course of the Fablehaven books and the Dragonwatch books, have begun to learn responsibility. The influence of caring about some mortals and having these mortals care about them has made them start to care, right? And they hate that they're becoming responsible. They're very resistant to it. And so in a way, it's a story about the end of adolescence. It's a story about how can these reckless, irresponsible satyrs learn to be heroes, the heroes of a story. And in that way, I think a lot of kids or teens can relate, because it's it's a phase of life that, probably some adults can relate to. This adult can relate to it. You know what I mean?
Kids of all ages, yeah.
I love the thought that nobody grows up until they have to.
Yeah.
And that's true in different ways. You know what I mean? And so, it's kind of fun to watch these satyrs get in a situation where they have to grow up a little. And it leads, and there's a Gorgon loose at Fablehaven. A Gorgon is like a Medusa. It can turn people to stone. And so it's a challenge the satyrs are out of their depth, but they get in a situation where they have to solve this problem. And it turns into I think a really funny adventure to watch the comic relief have to be heroes.
If someone has not read Fablehaven or Dragonwatch and they just dive right into this, the Tales of Newell and Doran, Are they okay? Can you start right with this series and still know what's happening?
Yeah, you actually can, because this is sort of like a spin-off series. So there's definitely a continuity for the 5 Fablehavens, followed by a sequel series, the 5 Dragonwatches, that is best to take those 10 books in order. That's the ideal way to read. Yeah. But like with Tales of Newell and Doran, if you've read the Fablehaven books, then you're familiar with the world and you're familiar with the characters, and that's all fine. But if you started with Tales of Newell and Doran, that story orients you, because it's kind of a spin-off story. It's a story where these satyrs are taking the lead, and it's pretty disconnected from the rest of the continuity of the series. And so, yeah, you could start there. It's kind of fast, it's kind of funny, and it's not a bad place to start.
There's a template in writing we always hear about, the hero's journey.
Sure.
That circular, the 3-act play, where the stage of the process is. Is that true for every great story, whether you talk about Narnia or Lord of the Rings, Fablehaven? Like, is hero's journey template perfectly matched to all of those? Is it just, it is what it is?
It is, I think the hero's journey matches our experience as humans. And that's why it's so unique. Because in its fundamental state, the hero's journey is just, you leave what's normal for you. You leave your ordinary life.
Yeah.
You do something you haven't done before. You, hopefully, as you do this thing you haven't done before, you eventually learn how to master it. You eventually overcome. And then you return to your ordinary life changed. And this happens to a kid the first day at school. He's embarking on a hero's journey. He's leaving his home and he's doing something new that he hasn't done before. And hopefully eventually he tries to master this thing, this art of leaving home and going to school. And it's true for somebody that goes into the military. It's true for somebody that gets a job. It's true for somebody that gets married. Like, you leave what you know, you cross into something you don't know, and you try your best to master it against challenges and obstacles. And so when you think of it that way, I think the hero's journey is so universal.
Yeah.
Because I think we all live it over and over again, and that's why it shows up in writing. You show me a character, show me them trying something they've never tried before, having to grow into the ability to achieve and to do it. And then what does that look like once they've mastered it and they return home?
Because it's so universal. When we read it, when we watch it, when we feel it, it's just, there's something familiar about it, right?
Yeah.
And satisfying when you finally get to the return and the accomplishment. And it is kind of a universal experience. Great and small, no matter the circumstance.
I have had so many hero's journeys in my life, and so have you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? If you look at it through that lens, you can find a bunch.
Very cool. And truth can be stranger than fiction.
Yes, isn't that true? And it's funny. Like, I find sometimes that you can't take certain true stories because no one would believe them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Here's a stranger than true. You won't believe this, guys, but this happened.
But that's what sometimes makes those true stories so great, too, because you're like, whoa.
It's not just the once upon a time. It's like, dude, this happened. Check this out. That's the cool story. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Now, you've created all these incredible characters, have a lot of depth. If you could spend the day with one of the characters you've created, hang out, who would it be and why?
If I could spend the day with one of my characters, right now in this moment, I would choose Raxtus the dragon.
Yeah.
Because in Fablehaven, dragons are, they're like intelligent flying sharks. They are alpha predators. You know what I mean? Like, you do not want to hang out with a dragon. But there's one dragon in the series who's the sparkly fairy dragon, Raxtus, who's actually nice. And like that would be fun. Because I've wanted to have a dragon friend ever since I was a kid. And so that would be cool. and it's a dragon that wouldn't eat me, and it would scratch the fantasy itch. So yeah, I'd hang out with Raxus.
Can you hear in your mind their voice? Can you hear like Benedict Cumberbatch, the voice of Smaug, and the depth, the heat, I don't know, just the scary element of those mean voices, but also the fun kind. Do you hear those as you're writing? You hear all the layers of that?
I hear quite a bit of it. The main way I write is I experience a movie in my mind and then I try to write. You know what I mean? So like I live it in my head in pretty good detail, and then I try to write that down. Like I think Raxtus his voice would be like who's the new Spider-Man? I keep forgetting his name. All of a sudden I can't remember his name.
It's Tom?
Tom Holland. Tom Holland. He'd be like a Tom Holland kind of voice.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He's friendly and unsure of himself, and like that makes him a dragon worth knowing, because he wouldn't.
That is awesome. There's so many layers to this. You got to check out Fablehaven, of course, and Dragonwatch, but the Newell and Doran, the tales of it. This is so cool, and it's such a great entry point for the kids right in that informative age, like when you started, as you're getting into the tweens or even 9 and 10. How young have you seen writers or readers start? I mean, we're talking like first out of the gate. Like this is like the first entry point to a whole new level of reading.
I'm usually, as they're starting to get into thick books, that's me, right? So people are transitioning to me out of Wimpy Kid, or they're translating, they're going to me after, shorter, easy reader books. And then as they're like, okay, let's try a thicker book. Let's see if I can find
take it to the next level.
Good book that's a little thicker. That's me. So, the savant kids are 7 or 8. Yeah. My standard readers are probably 9, 10, 11. Like that's when they're starting. And then it just goes on up to whoever would read a Harry Potter book. I usually get high fives from.
For sure.
One of the things that let me knew I might have a chance at this career was when I was a brand new writer, and maybe Fablehaven 1 was out, maybe Fablehaven 2. Pretty much nobody knew my name. When I did a book signing, it was very quiet. Yeah. And I was sitting in a bookstore, at one of these, there's a little line, I think, at the start, and then it's like, now wait it out, And so I'm sitting there waiting till the end of the time when the signing was technically over. And, alone at a table, and this old cowboy-looking guy comes walking up to my table. And I was absolutely sure he was going to ask me where the bathroom was. You know what I mean? There's no way this guy was here for me. But then he reaches back and pulls out this kind of well thumbed through copy of Fablehaven. And he's like, "Would you sign my book?" and when I said, I didn't know this guy. It wasn't my grandpa. I didn't know this guy. And I was like, okay, if this guy came to have me sign, came out of his way to have me sign, this might turn into something.
You have captured lightning in a bottle.
Yeah.
That is great story.
He was like an olive leaf. Like, oh, okay, this. There's hope here. There's hope in this moment.
That's promising. That's got to be so rewarding too. And from the beginning stages, not everything was a success. I'm sure you put things out there, and maybe it doesn't quite hit, or maybe you had maybe you batted 1,000. Maybe it's just all been peaches and roses.
No, yeah. Trying to get started as a writer is a backbreaker. Trying to get that first thing published is a backbreaker. I mean, like a lot of people, just trying to get the first novel written. A lot of people just never get through it because it's really hard. You're like, what am I doing?
It's saturated the market. It's just, how do I get
and then
seen?
Once it's written, how do I get anyone to care or to notice? And for me, it was years of submitting stuff and not even getting a no, just a non-response, right? Where you're just like, did they even look at it? You know what I mean? Like you worked so hard on it,
it's hard.
And you send it out and you just hear nothing. And so if you want to get started in writing or entertainment, as you would know, you have to have some thick skin, and you got to keep pushing hard. Sometimes through lean times and times when people don't seem interested, and you got to find something that you really think is cool and you really think is worthwhile, and just put all your heart into it and push as hard as you can, and see what happens.
Maybe there's some luck associated with it. I do know that Barry Manilow actually told me years ago. He goes, "I don't think there's luck in success at all. I think it's preparation meets opportunity."
Yeah.
When the opportunity comes around, are you prepared for that moment and show up?
It's wise. It's wise. It's true. It's true. But when you're trying to get started, that's hard to see. You can see that truth easier with some experience. Barry Manilow. He had some experience.
He's got some.
Sometimes when you're new, it just feels like such a cold, unfeeling world and such an impossible
everybody
task.
Hates me.
But it can be done. It can be done. I had no special inside track. I had no I had no literary history in my family. It was just seemed cool to me, so I tried hard to do it, and eventually the right break happened.
The industry from when you started to where it is today, those getting just they're at the ground level. How has that changed, and what advice would you give? Last thing as we start to wrap this up. What advice for that young author? How do you get noticed?
If you want to get noticed, here's the thing. You get noticed, if you talk to literarians, what they're looking for, they're looking for original voices, right? And so you work hard enough, long enough, that you find your storytelling voice. And then you tell the story that just needs to exist, the one that lights you up like a Christmas. You know what I mean? Like you find, you give them you until you is what they want. What will set you apart is, right, because you are absolute. And so you take your uniqueness and you harness it in the best way you can find, and that gives you the best chance.
I love that. Last question for you, and I know you have your own hero's journey going on. Even outside of being an author, your husband and father, you and your wife have a blended family of 11 children.
Yeah, crazy,
Any of
right?
your kids going to follow suit? They want to be authors? Are they going to take up the torch where you are and continue the legacy?
I have one daughter who likes to write. So she likes to write and draw, and she's way better at drawing than me. And so she might do something. But it's a big question mark. Like they all like different things. Some of my kids really like my books, have no interest in writing. You know what I mean? Like way more into learning how to fight and wrestle and learning how to like be good at soccer, or just all sorts of just a diversity of things, right? And that's how I want it. I want them to figure out themselves. But yeah, I've got some creatives too. So who knows?
Whether an author or not, we all have a story to tell, and we're all writing our own hero's journey story. And
this is true.
It sounds cliche. Maybe that's a bumper sticker, but I think it's a good thing to end on. Any last pieces of advice? Anything you want to leave with our listeners? And thank you for listening, Brandon. And your time is precious. I know how busy you are. Anything you want to leave with our audience?
If people want to connect with me about writing advice, I do have a podcast called Mulling It Over with Brandon Mull.
Perfect.
Once a month, I'll talk to an author and we'll just talk about writing. Or sometimes I just talk to my friend Jason, but we'll talk about writing principles. So if anyone's kind of looking to think or learn about writing principles, you could check out my podcast. Or if you just want to find out more about my books, that's brandonmull.com.
Okay, we will follow, and we're so thankful you come on Fresh Off the Set. I know you have a lot of projects in the works, so stay tuned with everything Brandon Mull is doing. He's a good dude. Thank you for being with us today and your insights into this fascinating world.
Yeah,
you're awesome.
Thanks for having me, David.
Thanks, buddy.
Congrats, you made it to the end. If you want to continue to freshen up your day, you can watch us on Fresh Living every weekday on CBS Channel 2 in Utah at 1 o'clock. You can also watch us on our YouTube channel, KUTV Fresh Living, and follow us on social media. We will see you next week.